This thesis, if you want to call it that, will be split into two parts. I will be explaining some of the various reasons why there have been systemic failures in modern societies, and I will be going through it relatively chronologically. The first of the two videos will be the introduction and some historical examples. And the second, likely longer video, will be on more contemporary problems we find ourselves in, and a bit on how to extricate ourselves from them. To set the stage, most systems that we wish to improve and control are complex and multivariate. That is, there are many contributing factors to the outcomes. For example, the gender pay gap, because why not start with the controversial? The gender pay gap is often attributed by left-leaning individuals to being wholly caused by, as the name suggests, gender. However, anyone who actually looks at this impartially will notice that there are countless potential reasons as to why women may make less than men. I say may because recent college graduate men actually make less than their female counterparts. This has many potential explanations. For instance, women seem to do better in school, so they graduate with better standing on average. They're potentially sought out more aggressively by public-facing businesses due to social pressure, and potentially go into professions that have a higher base salary, let's say business versus healthcare. Now, to suggest a potential reason why the average woman may make less than the average man, most obvious would be they get pregnant, so out of work for that, and often during very important years for their careers. And after the child is born, they are more likely to be caretakers, so they work less hours on average after the child is born and through adolescence potentially. To compensate, their partners would potentially work more hours. Overtime is very highly correlated to promotions and raises, so with men taking an outsized proportion of the overtime hours available, they're much more likely to gain a promotion, further increasing the rationale for them to earn while their partners do the child rearing. It's a cyclical cycle. Now for temperament. Disagreeable people earn more as they demand more pay, and men are more likely to be disagreeable than women on average. This is clearly a multivariate situation. So what happens if there is, for instance, on the side of government, This is clearly a multivariate situation. So what happens if there is insistence on the side of government that there is only one variable and make legislation to address only that variable? Well, we don't know until it's been attempted. You can't know what you don't know, only hypothesize. And it likely depends on the exact variable addressed. For instance, let's say we address job choice, as men often enter higher earning professions. So we do all we can to address these differences and force there to be equity in job choice. This would require a totalitarian government to force people into certain professions, and these people would likely not want to be in the professions forced upon them, as people do in fact have different preferences that emerge based upon sex. So when one is forced into something that they have little to no interest in, you would expect that one would be quite unhappy. And what happens if people are forced into a profession in numbers that outsize the market demand for said profession, or the reverse? So now you have a totalitarian government, which any freedom-loving person would say is quite unpleasant. You have unhappy individuals in professions they don't like, and you have a market shortage or oversupply in various professions, all to address the difference in job choice, which probably wasn't even successful, as this is government we're talking about. Now, I'm sure that the utopians and some of you may be saying that we must make improvements and radical change is needed. Well, no. Noted. I would much more strongly promote piecemeal efforts and improvements to society, which I will get to later, but to illustrate just why radicalism is so wrong, let's first look at the utopian ideals and societies of the past and see what we may glean from them. Marxism and the French Revolution. You would be hard-pressed to find an unbiased historian who would argue that the implementation of these two instances of utopianism were anything but an abject failure. I will grant that the French Revolution did inspire many others to demand political liberation, but so did the American Revolution, and the US went on to be a world superpower and the French fell from superpower status at the time, after, of course, inviting in extreme military over-expansion in the form of Napoleon. You have bottom-up utopianism in the French Revolution. They believed that man was perfectible, and it was only society getting in the way of that. Thinkers like Rousseau, who had a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature, believed that we are born good and society corrupts. To point out the flaws in this is quite easy. Firstly, man's differentiation from other animals is that we are capable of moralizing. We realize two things: that we can improve the lot of others by doing for them what we would like for ourselves, and the reverse of that. What would hurt me would also hurt you. This created the grounds for good and evil, mercy and cruelty. We are born with both. The morality of society in this way is simply a consequence of our individual morality. It is not an emergent property, as Rousseau would argue. It is simply not like water being wet. We can be evil individually, but an individual water molecule is not wet. Because of this fundamental misunderstanding, the French people, largely in Paris, uprooted society and sought revolutionary change. All they brought out was revolutionary brutality and fear brought about by the Committee of Public Safety. The perfectibility of society and man must be done by negation and destruction of dissenters, according to the utopian. This was very much the same in the Soviet Union, believed by Western intelligentsia at the time to be the society of the future, brought about by the vision of Marx and Lenin. The central idea was that we are all equal, except those in power, who are simply more equal than others. And to achieve this, they had to get rid of all non-equities. All inequities must, in this way, be due to the abuse of power. So, the village's most successful farmer, he must have cheated his way to the top. Off to the gulag. The best engineer? To the gulag. The best blacksmith? The gulag. The property owner? Gulag. Before the end of World War II, when us in the West were interested in preserving our freedom from the Nazis and Axis powers, we sided with a society that sentenced all those aforementioned people to the gulags. At the time, many were sentenced to tenors or 10-year services in work camps and the like. After the war ended, there were, of course, more traitors to be found, so quarters were instituted, 25 years. You picked up spilt grain after the state took all the grain you grew. You dare steal from the state. You were trying to destroy the fatherland. 25 years. You, child of 14, you took grain to fill your meager stomach that was so chronically empty your height is stunted? 10 years. Go. This is what must be done to reach the perfect society, of course. You all are so selfish, wanting to eat more than 6 ounces of stale bread for the day. That is what an equal society is. The social incentives were all broken, every damned one. The successful were disadvantaged at best. Their overproduction compared to others would provide them with no benefit other than a stay at the gulags for 25 years. How dare they be successful, to show that man is not equal in every respect? The society was game theory disadvantaged, and that those who did the least work gained the most for their work, compared to those who would produce more who were disadvantaged. But that was their utopian ideal, see? The truth is, of course, that man is not equal, in the sense that some people simply are better at doing X than others. And the cruel truth of biology is that some are better at any potential X than some others. You see, equity and equality are in fact opposites. Equality in the West is generally thought of being equality under law, that the law should not discriminate between persons, and of course we fail at this. But that is the ideal, that to which we reach towards. This produces inequity. That is, the outcomes of individuals are non-equal. Compared to equity, equity is equality of outcome. But we are not equal in capabilities, so then the only way to achieve equity is inequality under law. Certain people must be favored over others. The truth is that equality under law is not only morally better as a goal, but is also easier to achieve, and the Soviet Union found this out very clearly. I doubt the end goal of the starvation of tens of millions in slavery on an equal order was the intentions during the October Revolution. But the game of equity demanded just that. If you remember the example of the gender wage gap, there was a significant level of complexity that needed to be solved, as just job choice engendered many costs in it being solved, as it's a complex system. Now simply imagine that applied to every aspect of society. The level of complexity that needs to be solved is likely infinite, because as one inequity gets corrected, another is created, or two or three. This is the prize given for trying to engineer complex social systems. As mentioned in the start, this is only part 1. Part 2 will be coming very shortly. I hope that this first part was at least some food for thought.